What's good, everybody? Thank you for listening. Allow me to welcome you to the very first episode of the iAM Legendary podcast. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Ismail Amir. I am an educational consultant, a motivational speaker, a youth mentor, as well as a personal development coach, and just overall junkie for all things related to being and becoming a greater version of self. I cannot just emphasize my gratitude for you taking the time to listen, and I'm excited to kick this off. Our very first episode is going to be relatively short just as we're introducing the podcast, but the aim and the goal for the iAM Legendary podcast is to create a space just to have really great conversation and dialogue related to all things personal development. And in the next episode, I will share a lot more in detail about my story, my background, where I come from, what I've come from, and what has led me to this very moment of kicking this podcast off. But if you're listening, it is my hope that this podcast will be a blessing to you in your life. This podcast is right for you if you have any desire at all to become a better version of you today than you were yesterday, and a better version tomorrow than you were today. It is my ultimate belief that each and every single one of us was born and placed on this earth to be incredible and to do extraordinary things. But it takes intent and it takes hard work for us to be willing to step outside of ourselves, to be able to look back on ourselves, to recognize the things that we do well, as well as the things that we maybe don't do so well, so that we can reflect and then come up with a plan and take the right steps to become the people, the males and females, the husbands and wives, the fathers and mothers, the siblings and brothers and friends, and all of those things that we are destined to be, or that we're called to be. So that's the idea for our podcast. And in addition to that is my goal as well to allow you to be blessed by a variety of voices. There's a lot of people that I've been blessed to have in my life, and throughout our time together, I'm sure there will be people that you will recommend and refer as well, that you'd like to hear come onto this podcast and just to share their experiences. A big piece of the goal for this podcast is to create a space that is open and honest and vulnerable. Vulnerability is a value of mine that I believe really can go a long way and would go a long way in this world in helping people and our people just continue to thrive and to step outside of the box that is the norm. So that is a big portion of what we're going to do on the iAM Legendary podcast, is to have interviews and have conversations with some people that are doing some incredible things in the business world, in their personal lives. But in addition to that, people that have been through some things as well. I genuinely believe, and I know that we all have a story. Every person has a story to tell, and every person's story is of value and has value to help be a blessing to others. So that's what we're going to do on this podcast, as well as to bring in different guests and to discuss a range of topics as well. There are so many different genres and areas of personal development and just of life that are important to tackle and have real conversations about. So that's another goal, and that's what you can expect of this podcast. And then lastly, you can expect, or you should expect, to be able to walk away from every episode with some actionables, right? Some things, some steps, some ideas, some tools, some concepts that you can apply to your life today to immediately be of impact to help you along your journey in this thing called life. So it is my hope and it is my goal and my prayer that this podcast will be a blessing to you, and a blessing to others, and a blessing to people in this world. So if you find this podcast valuable for your life, which I pray that you will, I hope that you will leave a rating. It's my hope and my goal for 5-star rating. We're on the Apple Podcast app. So if you would go in and give us a 5-star rating, if you find this podcast of value, I would greatly appreciate it. And a review as well. Reviews are so incredible because they help people who are looking for podcasts of this genre get a feel for the vibe, for the information, and for what this podcast offers. But in addition to that, it gives me feedback, whether it's positive, specific about what it is that you like, or whether it's constructive about some things that you'd like to see done differently. I'm open and I want it all. So I'd really appreciate it, and I'd be grateful for that and eternally thankful. And then, of course, as well, for you to share, right? For you to share this podcast with friends, send it to a family member, send it to an auntie and uncle, or a friend, or just a stranger, right? Somebody that you encounter and that you can sense could be blessed by this podcast. I would love if you would share it with them, because it's going to be of value to them, but it's also going to help this podcast grow. And it is my mission and goal for this podcast to grow and to touch as many lives as possible. So if you share this podcast on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, or wherever, my Instagram handle is at iAM Speaks 23. So that's at IAMSPEAKS 23, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. But if you share this podcast, I will be sure to reshare and to tag you and thank you. But allow me to thank you in advance already. So I promised this episode was going to be brief, and it is, and we're going to get ready to wrap. One of the final things I want to leave you with, one is just the idea behind the name of the podcast, right? So we're calling the podcast the iAM Legendary Podcast, and that is a favorite affirmation of mine. And if you're not familiar with affirmations, look them up, and we'll cover them in a future episode as well. But affirmations are a really important and beneficial way just to speak life into ourselves, right? And it is my belief that each and every one of you and each and every one of us walking this earth was born to be legendary. We were not placed on this earth to just kind of fumble and fall and hiccup our way each and every day. We were born to do extraordinary things. I genuinely believe that. And I also believe that each and every one of us is creating the legend for ourselves, right? Yes, at some point in our lives, we will no longer physically be here, right? But the things that we have done, the way that we have made people feel, the way that we have been a blessing to others, that lives forever, right? And that's our legend. So each and every one of you is legendary. I believe that, and I want you to believe that, and to speak that over your life as well. Another thing that we're going to get in the habit of doing in this episode is just creating space to reflect and to practice gratitude, because when we're able to be intentional about thinking back, right, reflecting on how far we've come, the things that we've been through, it kind of helps put things in perspective regarding what we're currently facing and where we're currently going. And the gratitude piece of that is so important because it helps us shift our attitude, right? If we can be intentional about being grateful and being thankful for everything, thankful for it all, right? The good as well as the bad. Yes, I said the bad because the bad has molded us as well. And in episode 2, I'm going to share my personal story. In future episodes, you'll hear personal stories from guests. But a lot of times it's the pain that we've been through that is our biggest blessing and has helped us be the incredible human beings that we are today. So just want to encourage you to get in that habit, right? Take a moment to reflect on where you've been. Take a moment to reflect on what you've been through, and then let's talk about and let's verbalize what we have today that we're grateful for. And the last thing I'm going to do before we wrap up is just leave you with this quote. And this has quickly become one of my favorite quotes, and it's from Denzel Washington. He actually delivered a commencement speech. I believe the commencement speech was at Dillard University. I'll find it and put it in the show notes as well. But he says this quote, and it has stuck with me, and it has been imprinted on my heart. And it's, true desire in the heart for anything good is God's promise sent ahead of time that it is already yours. I'm going to say it again. True desire in the heart for anything good is God's promise sent ahead of time that it is already yours. Let that sink in. Let that dwell in your mind and in your spirit, family. And just believe that, right? Like if you have a dream, if you have a hope, if you have something in your mind or on your heart, a desire for something good, believe it's yours because it is, right? And just because you don't have it today doesn't mean anything. Honestly, you're just being molded, you're being groomed, you're being prepared for that thing. And when you can begin to behave like it's already yours, when you can begin to practice being successful and practice being in the right headspace and being in alignment with those good things, you're going to attract them and they're going to come your way. I know that to be true. I believe it. I feel it. And I hope that blesses somebody. I love you. And I just want to say thank you for tuning in to the very first episode of the iAM Legendary podcast. And I'll talk to you soon. Peace out.